الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل الله فما له من هاد والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلقه وأفضل رسوله سيدنا ومولانا محمد المبعوث للناس كافة بالهدى والرحمة وسعادة الدنيا والآخرة لمن آمن به وأحبه واتبع سبيله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأزواجه وذريته وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أجمعين. Maulana Maududi, we have been looking at Maulana Maududi's constitutionalism, and before we go on to that, we have been looking at the positive aspects of his revivalist work. So we covered the first point in this respect, his development of Shah Waliullah's conception of Islam as complete closed system, and we looked at his conception of jihad as a permanent revolutionary struggle or strategy, and the reasons for that. And today we are going to look a bit at his total rejection of Western, this third point, and and then we'll move on to the main topic. Okay, so let's go. The third aspect, positive aspect of his thinking, is his total rejection of Western epistemology. Epistemology meaning theory of knowledge, and Western epistemology is basically, by Western we mean modernist. Obviously we don't mean like Christian epistemology or Jewish epistemology, because we have some commonality with them. We don't totally reject them but we do totally reject modernism. So what is modernist epistemology? Modernist epistemology. So modernist epistemology is basically, there are three aspects to it: empiricist epistemology, and then rationalist. And obviously there are many schools which combine empiricism and rationalism. And within empiricism, there are different conceptions of empiricism, and within rationalism, there are different conceptions of rationalism. And also then there is scientific epistemology, which is not entirely different from empiricist and rationalist epistemology, but empiricist and rational epistemologies develop within philosophy, within the discipline of philosophy. On the other hand, scientific epistemology, especially after scientific revolution, that developed within different particular sciences and within the interdisciplinary practices within those sciences. So when philosophers of science theorize about scientific epistemology, that's a different thing, but we're talking about practice. So it shares a lot of things with empiricism and rationalism, but there's much more to scientific epistemology than just empiricism and rationalism. So these three, and obviously then there is another that people will try to combine 1, 2, and 3. I'm talking here only at the conceptual level, at the level of possibility. So I don't have in mind any specific schools or thinkers, but if I have to come up with names, I can, But while I'm developing this distinction, I'm not thinking of those things. Now, since we have developed this classification, let's talk about a bit about each of them. So, what is what is modernist? What is epistemology? What is empiricism? What is rationalism? And what is scientific epistemology? In just very precise and very in a summary fashion. We'll try not to go into detail, but even though we can't promise. So modernism is civilization and ideology. It is a different thing which replaces Christian civilization and worldview in Europe. And the basic difference is that the sources of knowledge. For Christianity is revelation is the highest source of knowledge. And obviously then there's senses and nobody denies that and reason. But especially in metaphysical and conceptions of the meaning of life and the total guidance about life, revelation is the supreme source, and senses and reason basically serve revelation. On the other hand, for modernism, sources of knowledge are basically senses and reason. And then there are different conceptions of senses and reason. And either modernists reject revelation or they interpret revelation according to knowledge based on senses and reason. So that's the basic meaning of modernism. Now, epistemology. What is epistemology? Let's look at the dictionary meaning first. Now, epistemology is derived from Greek. So, episteme in Greek mean episteme. And logos mean study or word. So you will find logi like biology, physiology. So that just means study. Episteme mean basically knowledge. And that's the word which Aristotle uses. A lot of people translate it as science. And science obviously is a Latin word which they used to translate episteme, but today we mean with science we don't just mean knowledge, we mean something specific. That's why that's not a good translation, but episteme mean knowledge. And this word come from a Greek word verb, to know or how to know, etc. So that's epistemology. So epistemology is study of knowledge. Knowledge in the sense that what is knowledge and the sources of knowledge. So what happens with modernity is not just I just talk about sources of knowledge, but that just reminded me to add that modernity, what is knowledge is also definition of knowledge. What is knowledge is also change, and basically knowledge is most of the time what we call information, for example. And number two, sources of knowledge. And sources of knowledge and their veracity, and which sources are better, and any contamination in those sources. And then obviously when you talk about knowledge and sources of knowledge, so you bring up the issue of any suspicion about those sources. So skepticism is a big thing in modernism. One of the thing about modernism is skepticism become the source of or a central epistemological problem, because modern epistemology starts with skepticism about what was before, skepticism about Christianity, skepticism about revelation and its veracity, skepticism about scholastic notion of knowledge, skepticism about all that was before, and then obviously it stays on. And in fact, Descartes uses skepticism to arrive at a point of absolute certainty. So that's a strange thing about modernity, that it has skepticism and absolute certainty. So people think that they are something different, but no. Skepticism is and the view of absolute certainty are intermingled together. And a lot of people today, among Muslims as well, become misled by this, because in fact skepticism at the basis of knowledge is a modernist conception. You won't find even in Greek where skepticism started, at least historically. You won't find it in Christianity. You won't find in Islam, despite people trying to read Imam Ghazali with Cartesian lenses. Skepticism doesn't have priority, neither in Greek philosophy nor in Christian scholasticism nor in Islamic ilm kalam. And also absolute certainty is also a very modernist conception. You don't have that in Greek philosophy, you don't have that in Christianity, you don't have, as far as I know anyway, you don't have in Islamic ilm kalam. So when people try to reinterpret yaqeen, for example, as absolute certainty, then that's totally alien conception they're trying to impose on Islamic epistemology and on Quranic words, for example. Okay, so these are the main conception or main problems of epistemology, or as we say in our Islamic terminology of Islamic discipline, these are masail of epistemology. Okay, so we defined modernity and modernist epistemology, and then we divided these epistemology into three types. So I'll just go through very briefly each of them. Now, the first one is empiricism. So empiricism, obviously, it's a very complex topic, so I'm not pretending to give you full coverage of it, even not brief coverage of it. But just to give you an idea, empiricism is, in a sense, a negative conception, because it denies or negates first. So it negates all other sources of knowledge, except knowledge from experience. So our mind starts as a blank slate, for example. So what they are interested in denying is both reason as a source of knowledge beyond experience, and revelation also as a source of knowledge. Although there were empiricists who believed in revelation, but I guess they believed either based on faith or believed it on the basis of, they justify it as the basis of experience. Or there were those who say, revelation is something non-human, so we are just talking about humans, so we are denying that reason is an independent source of knowledge. And by experience, what they mean is human experience. And by experience, I mean knowledge gained from senses, outer and inner sense. And reason, the role of reason doesn't, so that's the information is provided. Reason doesn't provide any information. So that's why, for example, they reject the claim that reason can see, or they intuit, that's a Latin word for see. And they deny that reason has any innate knowledge. So Locke, who is one of the greatest empiricists and sort of the founder of the British empiricist school, innate ideas, like ideas which are there before our experience. And normally rationalists think that those ideas are the basis of our knowledge. So knowledge start from experience, and by experience I mean senses, observation, outer and inner experience. And reason comes afterward to organize that knowledge and inference and all those. But reason cannot provide information. And in this respect, they basically deny two things: the ability of reason to see the rational realm. So in that sense, they probably deny rational realm as well. Or if there is a rational realm, we can only have inferential knowledge of it. We can't have a direct knowledge of it. And what they deny is the existence of innate ideas. Okay. On the other hand, rationalism also, like modern deny revelation as the ultimate or independent source of knowledge. But rationalism says that our knowledge starts with reason. So reason is not just a faculty of inference, but like senses, it's also a faculty of information. The only thing is reason provides us information about the abstract or rational realm, and senses provide us information about material realm. And basically what that's what differentiate rationalists from empiricists. And basically rationalists believe either that there are innate ideas, or they believe in the ability of reason to intuit or to see, or both. And obviously then there are those who try to combine these two schools, like Kant. So he takes some insights of the empiricists and some insights of the rationalists and tries to come up with what we know as transcendental or critical rationalism, etc., which takes on board the empiricist critique of rationalism seriously, but still try to salvage some of empiricist beliefs, or some of rationalist belief in the face of that critique. Okay. And the third movement in this is scientific epistemology. Now, this is a very important topic, and we'll talk about it, especially in our reading of Allama Iqbal's reconstruction of religious thought in Islam in detail, and we will also, inshallah, talk about it separately. But here I want to emphasize three things which are formative of scientific epistemology. So scientific epistemology is not concerned about theoretical status of the sources of knowledge as such, because it is a practice more than. So it is the dominance of the practice of scientific epistemology which discredited certain way of looking at the world rather than its theoretical claims. That's the first thing. So what is the practical concern of the scientific epistemology? The practical concern of scientific epistemology is to know or to understand the world around us. In such a way that then through that knowledge we are able to maneuver or impose our will a little bit. So to know or understand the world around us in such a way, and mostly the material world, in such a way that then through that knowledge we are able to maneuver that world in different way, and that's our ability to maneuver it would confirm or would verify the status of our knowledge. Our knowledge is true knowledge, or it is a misunderstanding. That's very important. And that's why what is important for this scientific epistemology, and this is the third point, is neither empiricism. That's a big misconception. For example, Iqbal has this misconception that empiricism is the foundation of science or rationalism. Uses empiricism, rationalism, whatever. That's not really what bothers scientific epistemology. And obviously, the misunderstanding Iqbal had, its basis in the fact that he was a philosopher. Empiricism is a philosophical tradition which emerged in order to rationalize scientific epistemology. But this is a huge, the basis of scientific epistemology is neither empiricism nor rationalism. What's the basis of scientific epistemology is controlled experiments. Experiments are different from observation, because you actually create a reality in such a way. You actually create a reality. So you are not studying the actual world, you are studying the actual world which you have abstracted from. You are studying your control environment which you have abstracted from the actual world, because the actual world is not a controlled environment. That's very important, because what is a controlled environment, and that's what experiments are about. What is a controlled environment? You can maneuver it, and through maneuvering those controlled experiments, you build knowledge of how you can maneuver. And that's what leads to technology. So you are not actually observing the world and then getting the knowledge, and no, you are actually creating an artificial world by abstracting part of the elements of the world from the actual world, and create an controlled environment in which you maneuver you vary different variables and control certain other variables, etc. And then you try to see the patterns. And the last thing is, then you try to quantify in a lot of time that knowledge which you gather from controlled experiment. So this is the scientific epistemology in a nutshell. And obviously, in this scientific epistemology, controlled experiments plus mathematics is very important. And obviously, controlled experiment first it started at the level where the distinction between, or the distance between, the controlled environment, the actual world, wasn't that great. But eventually, those controlled experiments, as the science progresses, achieve abstraction, and basically abstraction which corresponds to mathematics. And that's why in the long run all science is mathematized in that sense, because mathematics is based on abstraction, and so is the science. Okay, now let's come to Maududi, go back to Maududi, where we started actually. So this was all preface for this. We say Maududi totally rejects the modernist epistemology. What we mean is he rejects, or he should reject anyway, empiricism, number 2, rationalism, and scientific epistemology. And we are not claiming that he rejects that at the level of analysis, which we have just, even that level of analysis you won't find in Maulana Maududi. But he does it mostly on the intuitive and instinctive level. Intuitively and instinctively, he realizes that the modernism is jahiliyyah, and it's only Islam is haqq. And from that, so his rejection is not analytical in that sense, or the analysis is very rudimentary. It's more based on intuition, and that's why we need to turn Maulana Maududi's intuition into detailed analysis. That's what our work consists in part. And Maulana Maududi, that's the first, and total rejection. And Maulana Maududi's total rejection is also employed in his insistence that no new interpretation of Islam is needed. And that's what makes Maulana Maududi in principle an orthodox Rasikhul Aqidah scholar, and differentiates him from modernists of all types. Because what differentiates between Orthodox Muslim Rasikhul Aqidah, like Maulana Maududi, or in our subcontinent, that's basically Hanafi school, in both its Khairabadi, Barelvi, and Deobandi, and then the offshoot of that school, which we call Al Hadith, and then Asna Ashari, they are orthodox. Obviously, they are also orthodox in that sense, even though they are deviants in certain matters. But their deviation is not from the orthodoxy, but from Al-Sunnah. That's a matter within Islamic system. So that's the Orthodox Muslim. And then you have modernists. So modernists are two types. Muslim modernists, obviously modernists as such, so they have nothing to do with Islam, or Christian. Muslim modernists are those who come from Muslim families, but they reject the traditional Islamic interpretation and reinterpret Islam according to modernism. So Maulana Maududi's position is that we don't need a new interpretation of Islam, but we do need a new interpretation of our situation, because situation has changed. And so that's differentiate Maulana Maududi from Orthodox scholars as well, because other Orthodox scholars don't realize that situation is drastically changed. So in that sense, he has some commonality with modernists, even though he's not a modernist. But it's a good thing, good commonality. So Muslim modernists are those who say we need to reinterpret Islam according to modernism. So that's a totally diametrically opposite position than Maulana Maududi, because Maulana Maududi says what we need to reinterpret is our situation, and by understanding our situation according to the classical traditional Mujma' alayhi Islam, we need to develop a critique of modernity. And Among modernists, as I say, there are two types: modernists, Muslim modernists, who are Muslim because they come from Muslim backgrounds only. So they reinterpret Islam according to modernism. That's like Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan and Pervez and all those people. But then the people who are Islamic modernists, even though the term is a bit strange, like Allama Iqbal. So Allama Iqbal doesn't say that. Allama Iqbal said that modernism has a good side and bad side. So bad one he rejects totally, and good one is the one which is non-materialist. That's idealist and also empiricist. So from the point of epistemology, he side with empiricism, and from the point of ontology and metaphysics, he sides with idealism, especially of Hegelian type, Hegelian, and then he reinterprets Islam according to this good modernity that you will find in reconstruction of religious thought in Islam. So in that sense, Maulana Maududi totally reject modernism, Muslim modernism as well as Islamic modernism. So that's the greatness of Maulana Maududi. Let's go back to the text. So his total rejection of Western epistemology, by which mean modern, and insists on the position that no new interpretation of Islam is needed. What we need is the new interpretation of our situation. And then developing a critique of modernism and contemporary problems and challenges according to Islam. So that's the third aspect which differentiates Maulana Maududi from a modernist and make him an orthodox Muslim scholar. So we'll stop here, and next time we will start with despite this. So that would be a bit of critique of Maulana Maududi's.